folks, and I'm going to call the meeting to order. You need to mute your computer, Katina, please.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you. So the first order of business is Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I just want to say we have a couple of board members joining us in the hybrid mode virtually today, Cody Barr and Mark Doyle. And we also have the superintendent with us virtually today. And we have a couple of board members who are absent today due to vacation and or family matters. So we have a quorum, even though some people viewing this may wonder if we do. We have a quorum, and we're going to go through our meeting today. And we have the Assistant Superintendent, Neil Weathers, here with us today, sitting in Dr. Youngberg's seat, although she's watching you, you know. She's on that video screen. She'll see if you do anything crazy. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from April 6th, 2022. Motion made by Ilda to approve the minutes. Any second? Seconded by Katina. Is there any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion. We can vote. Actually, since we have it's hybrid, do we need to do a roll call since we have two people who are not here physically? What? Yeah, sure, thanks. Yay.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. The motion passed. The minutes are approved. We have nobody signed up physically to speak during public comment here today. Is there anybody online who would like to speak during? Are they all staff and board members? Okay. So we're on to the superintendent's report, and Dr. Youngberg, we're going to turn it over to you.
Hopefully everybody can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay. So my first update is the COVID update, and unfortunately the district is seeing a number of new cases. Most of those cases you will not find on our dashboard because they're not what we call reportable. We only report out on the cases that directly impact our learning community, and the district was closed last week. So most of the cases recently reported to us, are positives that took place during spring vacation. But we currently have 36 students in either quarantine or isolation and 4 staff members. So that's definitely an increase in what we've been seeing. All the rest of the information I'm going to share with you, along with that tidbit, is on our dashboard. We have. I'm sorry. Someone asked a question.
No. No.
Okay. We have the COVID team has resolved 3,324 total cases. We've had 827 cumulative positive cases since the beginning of the school year. Because there's an uptick in Windham and across the state, the VPH and the State Department of Ed has issued a letter just reminding folks about mitigation strategies. Staying home if they're not feeling well, increasing ventilation, getting vaccinated, getting tested, whether that's by the home tests or going to your local pharmacy or test sites. The letter that DPH sent us has been posted on our website and went out via our live feed and social media posts. Remember, we're trying to move in the direction of maintaining this virus, living with it. So, we want to listen to DPH, but that is the goal. There's, still rules they want us to follow. So just giving everybody an update on COVID. And I can tell a lot of you are wearing masks tonight that weren't wearing them before. So you're probably, that's one example of something you can do if it makes you feel more comfortable, for sure. Any questions?
Everybody all set? I think we're all set. Go ahead.
Okay, my next update is just information about the executive director recommendation that the board will be thinking about discussing and potentially acting on at the end of toward the end of the meeting. So I just have some information to share. Hopefully you still can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. We'll let you know if we can't hear you.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
All right, so board members, as you know from our correspondence, tonight's agenda and the meet and greet that was scheduled for just before this meeting, Dr. Marcus Ware is the candidate I'm recommending for the Executive Director of Strategic Initiatives position. My decision to recommend Dr. Ware came after a 3-round interview process that included a variety of staff members and one of your board members. Dr. Ware is currently the principal of Windham Middle School and has done a great job leading that school through some challenging times after being named interim principal in August of 2018. He is an instructional leader who believes deeply in ensuring all students receive high-quality learning experiences delivered within a peaceful and tolerant school climate. He is not afraid to have the courageous conversations with students, staff, and families, and is always focused on removing barriers to student achievement and success. He connects well with people and is authentic in his interactions. He is proficient in English and Spanish and deeply interested in supporting our dual language program as well as the specialized programs currently housed in the middle school. He is deeply reflective, keenly observant, and willing to take feedback. Dr. Ware's leadership experiences before he came to Windham, his experience as an assistant principal and as the head wildcat at Windham Middle School, as well as the lessons learned through his own 93 program and internship, have truly prepared him to move from a school leadership role to a central office leadership role. While some may be upset that I am taking Dr. Ware from the middle school, I prefer to see it as making sure an effective leader remains in Windham to continue to positively impact our student outcomes. The board should also know that Dr. Ware has a science background and a clear understanding of meteorology. You may not know this, but we always consult with him on impending storms after we've heard from our contracted meteorologists. Just as a side note, just in case you're wondering.
Can we save some?
To appoint Dr. Marcus Ware later on in tonight's agenda, as I am certain he will be an asset to my central office team.
I'm just wondering if we can save some money on meteorology then.
It's true, we might be able to write that off.
I'm just kidding.
He's actually been right a couple times over the other person that we contract with, so. I don't know if there's any further questions on that, or you just want me to keep moving in superintendent's report?
Well, we do have discussion and possible action on this under the action items, so I guess when we get to that point, if people want to discuss this and ask questions, they can do that. Does that make sense to the board? Okay. And at that point, also we'll probably call on Dr. Ware to say something. Okay? So be prepared. So we're on to celebrations then.
Okay, so there's just one update, one celebration I wanted to share with the board, and that is to let you know that there's a slide that should be up behind you. That is to let you know that on Friday, April 8th, the State Department event declared the winner from our Voice for Change proposals that the Windham High School students put out. So Brian, Alyssa, Kylie, and Alana, they were chosen for their courtyard project, which is basically a project that's going to help students and staff enjoy some outdoor space in the courtyard in the high school. That is not part of the renovation project, so the fact that they got it funded by the State Department has kind of been a really, it's a good thing. So we wanted to celebrate that team of students who had their project chosen.
That's very exciting. Congratulations to the 4 students and the support they also probably got from the high school staff in putting this forward. So thank you. So are there any questions for Dr. Youngberg before we move on? Okay, so now we're on to committee reports, and Personnel Committee is up first.
We also talked about the fact that board members, if they have any questions or input regarding Dr. Youngberg's midterm evaluation, that they would get those questions or statements to me. I have only received some from Dr. Gallucci, so I don't know if anyone else has some that they would like to respond to, and then I believe we'll go over that when we have our mini retreat. And there was no public comment, and we adjourned. And our next meeting will be, unfortunately, we had to change the meeting date because I do have to work on the closing of my dad's house. So our next meeting will be May 3rd.
Thank you. Neil, is there something you want to? Yeah, go right ahead.
I just wanted to clarify on the teachers from Spain. It's not one is returning, is it?
No, one is not, I believe.
One is not returning.
Yeah, do you want to, we have 6 that are coming back next year.
Mm-hmm.
That is, we have 6 that are returning this year.
Oh, 6
Yes.
of 10. Okay. I'll adjust my minutes. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Okay, thank you, Paula and committee, for that report, and that retention number is nice to hear. Good work. Congratulations to everybody who's working on that. School planning and design, Brendan is absent this evening, so we didn't make, because we didn't find out till just the last minute, we haven't made provisions to share anything from that report unless somebody else wants to share something from that committee. Not at this point. I think we'll just hold on that report then until our next meeting, if that's okay with folks? Yes. Okay, we did have a meeting, but I didn't bring my notes from it, so Mary, I don't know if you remember enough to report, but okay. So now we're on to sort of the workshop part of this meeting, in which we're going to focus on the district data teamwork. And Tracy and Neil are going to give that report.
I'm actually going to let Neil take the reins on this one. The district data team is something that he normally leads, and I attend, but he's the leader of the district data team, so I think he can handle this workshop. Go ahead, Neil, take it away.
Thank you. And by the way, you have wonderful china in your dining room hutch, by the way. So, good evening, everybody. Tonight we are going to talk about the district data team. This year we restarted the team. We've actually had this in the past in the district, but this iteration started in early fall, and we've been going through this year, meeting usually the third Tuesday of every month, and we will just talk about what we've been doing and go through hopefully kind of like a mini exercise of sorts of some of the work that we do when we meet. So, what does a district data team do? I know you're all chomping at the bit to know. Well, we sit as a group. We meet. We've been meeting virtually this year. A district data team monitors information related to performance, analyzes and makes inferences about the information. Often the data is usually related to assessment, student performance. It could be other metrics related that we see in the school. Attendance is another big one, for example. And it could be other indicators like course participation, things like that could be potential topics. Then one of the things the district data team ultimately should be doing once it's really firing on all cylinders is making decisions and recommendations around instructional practice that will improve performance, things that is caught in the data, and the conversation guides us to help the schools improve what they're doing. And then one extra thing I put as a side bullet that's not really part of a typical process, but something that I think is really important in our initial work this year is building consensus and capacity around understanding the information being analyzed, kind of formally assessing where we're at as a group in understanding information, because when you're dealing with statistics and data, there could be some, not intentional, but misunderstandings and misrepresentation. So it's very important to come to understanding and have discussion within the group. So I know the next exciting thing you're chomping at the bit to know is what information does the district data team look at? Well, we look at data team practices across the district. We really haven't done this year, but a district data team does do that. I put in bold things that we actually have covered this year, and I'll get to on the next slide, or upcoming slide. Terminology around optimal learning environments, making sure we understand what that means, and having a clear understanding that when we say a certain jargonous word, as you know, education's full of those acronyms, that we all have the same agreement on what that means. Assessment data, and I just listed some. We have more than this, but you have the iReady data, our PSAT and SAT data, SBAC, NGSS, our alternative assessments, our physical fitness assessment, Lost Links, and that's just naming some of them. We look at attendance information. I know that we did a mini report to the board earlier in the year, but we do attendance data on we did chronic absenteeism, but we also can talk about daily attendance as well. And then one thing that we've kind of started to scratch the surface, but I think is really central to the work of a district data team in Connecticut is around the accountability index metrics. And in case, for people that don't know what that is, an accountability index is something that prior to the pandemic comes out every year around February, March, and gives us kind of a report card score, and we're compared to all the districts and schools in the state, and there's multiple indicators. It's pretty comprehensive. So we've discussed those three indicators there this year, which are basically achievement, growth, and chronic absenteeism, and talked about that a little bit. So this year, what our district data team has done is we started off with an activity, what am I looking for, what do I see, where the group, which is primarily this year, our district and building leaders and our building coaches, we talked about in breakout groups we listed probably 7 pages worth of acronyms and words about what they think. Oh, there we go. Thank you. What we define as optimal learning. So then when I looked at the list of 7 pages, we just saw tons of acronyms and lists, and I'm like, if I was in education, I wouldn't know what this means. So then, since then, we've been slowly evolving. There's over 50 pictures on the current document of images that actually visualize what those things are. So like in the presentation, learning objectives posted, that's what that could look like. Differentiated instruction, that's a WIN group, I believe, at Natchog Elementary School, where they're focusing on helping students out get what they particularly need in instruction. So those are 2 examples. I'm hoping to formally share the document out, as we complete it by the end of the year. Another thing we talk about is attendance, which, as everyone knows, is a major talking point, an area of concern for our district, given the current state we are in with the pandemic. When we did this work, we talked about the accountability index indicator, how this stuff is calculated, and really trying to understand what we're being measured against. That little image is just actually something we shared earlier in the year. It's something we monitor, just to let you know that we're monitoring it. And often when we're looking at data, just so everybody knows, there's massive, sorry. Thank you, I'll get there.
Somebody else to do that for you?
I volunteer Ilda. Okay, so, all right, thank you.
What does she press? Just make sure she knows
Yeah,
what to
just
press.
that button. Yeah, I'll
This?
tell you. Yes, that arrow.
Okay.
You got it. Good work, Ilda. Thank you very much. Okay, so, all right, I carry on. All right, so, anyways, we talk about, there's a lot of data shared with massive spreadsheets, and usually we try to do work groups where people meet and then come back and talk about certain things. So in this particular group, we were talking about the strategies that the school teams are currently employing and what they find to be most effective. And then ultimately what you'd like to see, if something particularly is more effective at a building, what are they doing and how do you replicate that in as many places as possible? And then the last several meetings have actually been, for me personally, oh, we get to click now, sorry. Oh, look at you. All right, we're rocking and rolling here at the Board of Education. All right, so we had data work groups, and what we did in these is either leaders or teachers or coaches have asked questions, and we, in work groups, just basically explored the questions and talked about it. So, for example, some of the questions is people wanted to know what the historical PSAT or SAT data tells us, or you can make an argument what it doesn't tell us, and we talk about the benefits and the limits about that information, and we had some really good conversations and groups came up with different points of view. That was one thing we did. The other thing is sometimes will come up with a hypothesis, and really we often make assumptions that we just assume something's true because it makes sense, but it may not prove that way. For example, how strongly does attendance correlate with performance on grade 2I Ready Math? One would think, oh, there's a really strong correlation between attendance, but that wasn't the case in that particular grade. That wasn't true in all grades, but just pointing out it's not always what you think, so that's why you really need to look at the information and have evidence, and then explore why isn't that the case here, and have that rich conversation, which we've been starting to do. And then the last data work group that we did recently, and again, this was from one of the data team members, is did student growth vary for students who are performing above, at, and below grade level in reading? In other words, in those different levels where students started, was their growth different? And we just explored that and had a really good conversation around that. And actually, we didn't find great variance in the information we were looking at. So again, just it was fascinating. It wasn't what people were necessarily expecting to see. All right, so next. So our next steps for next year is what we really want to do if you're really having an effective district data team is expand and diversify the district data team to include different stakeholders, not just our leadership team, but include classroom teachers, other staff members, and really start to spread the word about this information, and then figure out a way to disseminate the information and recommendations in a way that is effective and we have a shared messaging. So that's our to me, a really important next big step for next year. Develop data monitoring norms as it relates to the accountability index. What can we use internally to have a sense of how we're doing, what we can do to improve? We sort of do this now, but like making it more systematic. And then really what I want us to get into doing, and I think is a critical, something Tracy and I talk about, is actually make recommendations as it pertains to the accountability index so that we can actually improve those measurements for the district. So in the next slide, really, I'm just, when I say simulate in quotes, I'm just going to quickly, or actually, I think what I'll do is stop for a minute and ask if anyone has any questions about anything I've said so far.
Does anybody have any questions? I see Paula.
I guess just a very general one that I probably could even leave to the end, but I'm just thinking in terms of staffing and costs related to data teams. And the reason I say that is because I know many years ago, I'm going to use Natchog School, had gotten this nice amount of money at which they were able to form a data team, and within that school year or so had made so much progress because they had the staffing to look at the data and then really interpret that data and meet with teachers and implement what they were finding.
So my experience has been when I was first involved in data teams in my previous district, there were concerns about making data teams work, so there was initial cost and sort of coverage. But over time, and I think this can be true here, that with some prudent strategic scheduling, you can make data teams work without really breaking the bank and being efficient about it now. But initially, that was, I remember like a decade ago, I remember those conversations, even though not in this district I was part of.
Any other questions? Paula, you need to turn your mic off.
Thank you.
I have a question. So you talked about expanding the data teams, bringing in other stakeholders. So who's on the data team now?
So currently, so every third Tuesday from 1 to 2, essentially the building instructional leaders and instructional district leaders are invited, as well as the building coaches. That's how we started. But next year we'll talk about like diversifying that, so we don't necessarily need the same representative stakeholders from each school, and we'll talk about changing some in and out, but that's currently who attends it. And by the way, and Tracy and I have talked about this, if board members are interested in attending, they're always welcome and they're invited.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Anybody else have any questions? I have a second question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if you were on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being just getting started with data teams and 10 having the optimal functioning data team work in a district, where would you say we were on that spectrum?
So in terms of the district data team, I think we have some ways to go in terms of really being truly effective, because we've had some starts and stops in my time in my previous position. I've worked in the district data team, but I would say data teams in different capacities, like at different buildings and departments, are at varying places. And there is some effectiveness, but I think we have a lot of improvement we can make there collectively, but like not from the classroom teachers and the work they're doing with their principals, but systematically from like our district perspective, how we can guide them and make them help them be more effective.
So you mean on analysis and then implementation of recommendations and things of that sort?
And usually where people fall down typically in a data team is making the recommendations. A lot of times you can get caught in the weeds talking about the data, and then your time's up and you don't really talk about how to improve stuff. That's probably one of the most common things that happens.
Katina, and then Ilda.
Yes, I was going to ask if besides statistical data, do you collect any qualitative data to enhance the numbers?
So we haven't done that yet this year, but in past data teams, we have looked at survey data, for example, or other qualitative data measures, and that's sometimes really good. And one thing we haven't done as much in some of these exercises is triangulating data with qualitative and quantitative. That's always like awesome to do. Or using multiple, even numerical data points to kind of prove something or strengthen a relationship or weaken the relationship.
Hilda?
So if you wanted to look at this data, where would we find it?
So because it's informational student data, we house it. We have some district sites that our information systems house for people to access. We actually switched from Performance Plus to Performance Matters. Apparently the last word was bothering people. I'm kidding, the other one phased out. So we have that. And then, so we're currently training some of our staff how to access that. But usually some of the platforms, for example, iReady is very rich to access information if teachers or administrators or other people in the district want to access it. And College Board's another example. If you have access, you could see how your students are doing. So if you have requests or information, we could, as always, try to get you that information.
So you're saying if a board member wanted information, they should go through you and request information, but it's not data that just one of us could go look at and.
Right, so we'd want to clean it up so it's not violating any sort of
Right.
privacy rights of students or
Correct.
families.
Is any, Mark or Cody, do you have any questions? I don't want to ignore you. Okay. Oh, Tracy.
I just have one thing to add. You asked the question of Neil about rating the district data team's performance on a scale of 1 to 10. And I think his response is accurate, although I couldn't hear if he gave you an actual number. But one of the things I know the district absolutely needs to do is have a deeper understanding of how the accountability index works. And Neil alluded to it in one of his previous slides. We sort of dance around it, but I'm not sure we truly understand, or I shouldn't say that, I'm not sure we're truly putting all of our energy into understanding how to actually move the numbers on the accountability index. And they're arbitrary goals and numbers, but it is the way the state determines whether or not we're successful as a district. So I feel like we have to dig in deep around the accountability index. And it's something that we've already started doing, but it's definitely something you're going to see more next year for sure.
Katina?
I was just thinking if there are any mechanisms to teach the teachers about the appreciation and use of data or data, however you pronounce it. Not all of us are in universities are trained to understand or love statistics. As Mary's going like this, I see you. Just notice your head. So, wondering if there is any in-service trainings or method in which you are helping teachers understand and buy into and utilize data.
So that's a really good question. So actually, and I remember you were at a couple of them. So when I first started in the district and the accountability index came out, some of the schools would invite me and I would come explain some of the indicators to buildings and sort of do it that way. But I think one of the things that the data team could do is thinking about how to professionally develop and make sure, like the same way we did. That's why I started with the district leaders to build some consensus and understanding and grow, and then start, how do you effectively spread that across the district so we have a shared understanding. So to me, there's like a phase one, but yes, like I do think, and there's people that sometimes don't think they understand data or information, they have a better understanding, and vice versa, right? Like many things.
Are there any other questions before Neil moves forward? Okay, thank you. Go right ahead.
All right. So the last part, all I'm going to do is just quickly talk through this, and if you have any questions. to give you sort of a simulation of something, an activity that the data team might do when they're meeting. So one thing I was just curious about, and actually I was thinking about it when this group was mentioning we were looking at something, we talked about subgroups, for example, basically the idea of, in terms of growing from fall to winter, how are our English learner students or our students with disabilities or our free reduced lunch students doing compared to the average, or more specifically the students that aren't in any of those subgroups, and just looking at that, not making a judgment, just even trying to see what's happening, right? So as a result, in the last meeting, that is actually the work we did. So typically what we would do is go over what the data is and talk about the definitions, which I'll do, and then the team would note any observations or ask any clarifying questions. Just say questions, I apologize. And then ask any inference questions or make conclusions, and then really determine some follow-ups. Maybe we have to dig deeper and look at something else, or what should we recommend as a result of this. So we're still on pretty much the surface level, but that's by design and intention this year, and then we'll dig deeper next year. So with that in mind, there's 2 slides here. I should have put a hyphen in the middle, but I apologize for this lengthy title. So this is really grade 5 iReady fall to winter reading growth. This first chart is the average % of annual growth. So to explain what that means, if you get to the 3rd column, we took every student where they started on the test in the fall and where their scale score was in the winter. And one thing about iReady that's important to understand is, depending where you are, you have a different growth target. So students that are, for example, a grade level or 2 grade levels or greater below, their growth target is much greater than a student that's already on grade level. So we went through and calculated all of them, and through just some Excel fun, we calculated it out, and we were able to determine that in grade 5 winter reading, the average was 83% of the year's targets was met by January, which is really good. But the interesting piece of that data is, if you look down, and in the first column, I mentioned the number of students. So we have 243 students that took a fall and winter iReady reading test, right? We have some students that took one or the other. They don't have growth scores because you need both. When I put no subgroup, there's 51 students in grade 5 that are not special education English learners and or free reduced lunch eligible as determined by the state. We're a community provision district. All our students receive free lunch, but based on the state metric. Of those 51 students, you can see their average % of growth is greater. They've averaged over a year growth already in January. And then you could see in special education, all of the groups are above 50%, which is good, but you can see there is clearly a difference between the no subgroup and the subgroups. And then when you look at the average stretch growth, what that is basically simulated to like a year and a half of growth. When students make this, it's promising because that's things that will help close gaps. Potentially, because one thing is, you notice if the no subgroup group still has room to grow itself because it is leading the pack there with 59%. So we might see improvements in all the subgroups, but it may not necessarily initially show as closing the gap, for example. And then normally we would do this in a big spreadsheet, and then I would show these tables at the end. Sometimes looking at the raw data is, well, for me at least, really fun. I don't know about anyone else. Life of the party I am. Okay, so grade 5 iReady fall to winter reading growth. This one is the % of students that are on target to make their growth. So these numbers are a little smaller. These are the actual taking a student, whether they have exceeded 50% of their growth target already or not. And you could see once again, in the no subgroup, already 70% of the students have done so, and you can see some differences in those groups. So we obviously, by the end of the year, want to see all. And in one little asterisk or caveat, technically when this test was taken, it wasn't halfway in the year. but I measured it as if it was like more like 40-something percent. But I don't think anyone will lose sleep over that. But that's sort of a simulation of what we might look at in a data team. You're welcome.
Thank you, Neil. That was a good way to illustrate what the staff is looking at. And then if you're doing that on all those different things, it's overwhelming, actually, to think about, for me at least. Is there anybody who has any questions? Or Tracy, do you want to add anything?
I just want to thank Neil for doing all the work on that one. Thanks, Neil.
And I just want to thank all the members of the team and people that even looked at the presentation. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Good job.
Seeing no questions, I think this gives us all food for thought, and we look forward to hearing how this work progresses. So we have a lot of action items on the agenda tonight. It's going to be this way as we move forward, particularly around policy issues. But the first batch of action items is requests to attend out-of-state field trips, and we have 5 different requests. We could act on these all together, or we could act on them separately. But you're going to say something, Holly? Mark, do you have a question about the field trips?
Actually, no, I was going to make the recommendation that we take them as one item. We vote on them as a unit of 1 through 5. That was going to be my motion.
I second that.
Motion made by Mark to take them all as one item, seconded by Ilda. Is there any further discussion, or do people have any questions on any of these field trip requests? Paula?
Just a question on the high school, which sounds really exciting, but it's 45 students. Is that the total number of students in those grades, or is it specific to certain students in certain subjects?
Museum of Natural History field trip you're asking
Right.
about?
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody on staff have any answer to that question, why that's the number of students that are going?
I'm assuming it
Trying
had
to figure that out right now. Just give me 1 second.
Okay. So we'll hold on that. And are there any other questions while we're waiting for Tracy to get the answer to that one? Mary?
Was the motion just to do these as a group, or are we now voting on it too? I mean,
We're going to vote on it as a group. So, sorry. You're absolutely right. Thank you, parliamentarian, for reminding me. So we're going to vote on whether or not to take this up as one motion before we continue the discussion with questions. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we should take a roll call vote because we have some people who are not here in person. Yay.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we'll take this all as one motion. Tracy, have you had a chance to get the answer to Paula's question?
It appears to me from looking at the application that it's our ESOL department in the high school, which would limit potentially the numbers, but I'm going to get you more information. I've texted the principal to find out.
Are there any other questions about any of the other field trips requests?
Do they need any more chaperones?
I don't see any questions from anybody. Do you feel, Mary, go ahead.
Well, I know these are all out of state, but I noticed that North Windham School and Natchog don't have any. So I guess maybe they will have them in maybe the next month or have something else. But I guess perhaps in the future we could learn that.
Is there any response to Mary's observation?
All I can tell you is we put forth all of the applications that come through my office, so I haven't received any others to my knowledge, so I can follow up with those principals as well to find out why. And perhaps they're gonna be at the next board meeting if they're planning an out-of-state field trip.
Right, and I can tell you that we have approved in-state field trips for those schools.
Well, that's helpful, thank you. Yes. So they're doing field trips, they just may not be out of state. Any other questions? So are we ready to vote to approve these field trips in one block? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the field trips.
So moved.
Moved by Katina, seconded by Paula. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote, please. Yay?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the discussion and possible action regarding the appointment of Dr. Marcus Ware as the Director of Strategic Initiatives. I'd entertain a motion to that effect.
So moved, Ilda Ray.
Ilda made the motion. Do I get a second?
Second?
Second by Paula. Okay, now we're open for discussion. Dr. Youngberg shared a statement from herself before when she was doing her superintendent's report. I would invite Dr. Ware to, if there's anything you want to say, well, or we can wait till after we vote. What would you prefer? Okay. Well, why don't you come up to the mic and just share anything you want to share with us, and then we'll wait. Well, in the past, we've asked the person to speak to us before we make a vote.
Is this on? Oh, it is. Sorry. So I would say I'm just excited to actually be nominated. Through the 4 years I've been here, I think that it's not only the work that I've placed into Windham Middle School and leading it. I think what I've learned in being here is that it's always room to actually get more involved in the community and also to lead by example and lead in different ways. So when this opportunity came up, I definitely did jump on it. And it's not just about the actual position itself, it's about actually just putting our schools on the map. And I feel like this position and working with Mr. Weathers and Dr. Youngberg and trusting me, I'm very excited to jump in and get my hands dirty and do what needs to get done. So I thank you in trusting me to be in this post.
Thank you. So, are there questions, discussion? Anybody want to? Yes, Ilda?
You have been, Dr. Ware, you've been the perfect amount of specialness that this school needed at the right time to get it back on track when you came. And it's been a pleasure working with you. I like to say when I was here, but it wasn't me, it was my daughter. But yeah, and I don't know how can we replace you at the middle school, but the team's gonna be even better now. Don't take that personal.
Any other comments? Oh, thank you, Ilda. Didn't mean to cut you off. I thought you were done. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Katina?
Well, I have to say that I am excited about you leading the project-based learning in the district overall and in each one of the schools, and guiding the principals and teachers, because we all not learn by reading and writing, we learn by doing. And I am so excited to see the kids active and involved and learning about everything through how to make a pen, whatever the project is. So thank you.
Any other questions or comments that anybody would like to make? I guess seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote on the motion that's on the floor. Yay.
Aye.
Definitely.
Aye.
Aye.
The motion carries. Congratulations, Dr. Ware. And I know your absence will be noted here at the middle school, and we have a big task ahead of us as a district to find a replacement. But welcome to a new administrative role in the district. Thank you. Okay, so the next item is discussion and possible action regarding the Windham Pride survey request, and I'll entertain a motion. First, motion made by Katina. Do I get a seconded by Ilda? Okay, so now it's up for discussion and possible action, and I note that Karen Ravenel Brown is here. Did I say your name correctly?
Bloom.
Okay. Is here on hand from Windham Pride to answer any questions that board members may have about this during the discussion. If there are questions that you can help us with, please feel free to move up to the mic and answer them, okay? So I'll open it up for discussion. Does anybody have any questions or things they'd like to raise? What, say it into the mic, please.
When does this start? When do you start passing out the survey to the students?
That's assuming it gets approved tonight.
Right. The first step is to get the approval. Yeah.
Of course.
Then, yeah, then there are different phases. Oops. Then there are different phases that parents would have the opportunity to also review the survey. And so there would be 2 weeks after the parent, the parent opportunity to review the survey, and 2 weeks following that, then they could be administered.
Paula?
Has this survey been done before elsewhere? It's pretty intense. I'm just wondering what kind of, if any, reactions you might have gotten from students after or during taking this.
Right. So this survey's been done since, I want to say, probably about 2009, 2010, through the Windham Public Schools. And there are a few tweaks to it, as you see it now, but it's been pretty close to this model over the years. And it was developed, it's kind of based on a national survey, too, that goes out. And these are, just to bring about more awareness, community awareness, provide information for the schools, for all of us of how we can better support, our youth and families in the community around, some pretty challenging topics and issues. But this particular survey has been developed by the CRAC, which is our Regional Health and Behavioral Action Organization, and they cover 49 towns in this whole region. So this survey is done in many other schools as well.
I think Mary had her hand up.
Yeah, I thought it was quite intense as well. So is it done every year? And it also says it's given to all 6th through 8th grade students, although then it says it's voluntary. So
Right.
what type of response rate have you gotten in past years? And do you anticipate possibly shortening it or making it less I don't know. I find sixth grade rather young for some of these questions.
Yep. Well, it has been done for grades 6 through 12 over the years, and it's been pretty, the length of it has been pretty much about this. In fact, this is a little bit shorter than what it was done in the past. What was your other question?
And then I had another comment, because my kids went through the schools, and I don't remember ever being told about it, but
Yeah.
it was about the voluntary kind of what's the response rate and.
Right, so parents, first of all, parents can opt out. If a parent decides they don't want their child to take the survey, they can opt out. A student could also themselves say, I choose to not take the survey. This will be done electronically, and in the past, it has been a pretty good rate, depending. It's typically done at once every 2 years, and it helps the coalition. Our coalition is made up of 12 different sectors of the community. So we have school, police, social service agencies, businesses, faith-based community members, all on our coalition. And then we utilize this to help with our logic planning and areas that we want to target, and also, again, partner with the schools, partner with our other community members, and how we can best implement and target some of these areas of need. So, and also, looking at the risk and protective factors. So what are protective factors? We build logic models and decide, okay, how we're going to best approach certain steps. And with that, for example, things like this, a few years ago, we saw, just levels with mental health, some mental health concerns. So through this, we had some grants. So we applied for a lot of different grants, and we were able to purchase materials that were used in the school when they had, I think it was a trauma-based training with the school social workers and guidance counselors and so forth. So we purchased all the books for that. So that's just one sample of something that we've done with the data. But this is also, when I'm just listening to the other portion of your presentation just now in the different data collection, is that this is another level of data that the school can use, and it's really to help school staff, school personnel, guidance, the mental health, the school-based health centers, be able to work with this and see where we can be of most assistance, both in school time and out of school time.
Thank you. Cody or Mark, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, probably just for you, Lynn. The first one is clarification of the motion. Where the motion is just getting our permission to distribute the survey to the students, is that right?
Yes, it's Board of Ed approving the administration of this survey in the Windham Public School District.
Okay, and follow-up question is just, why is this something that, like, Tracy couldn't have just approved? Why did it require board approval? Just curious.
I don't know the answer to that. Dr. Youngberg?
Yeah, we actually asked our attorney for some guidance on this because we had heard there were other similar surveys being turned down, and the attorney's suggestion to us was to get board approval before having our students voluntarily take the survey.
Can I ask why other boards were turning them down? Is that what you said?
No, not turning down this specific survey, excuse me for maybe it's like that, but I can get you the exact communication between ourselves and the attorney, but it was brought to our attention that we should ask for feedback and get board approval for this survey. Not,
Okay.
the other boards turning down surveys was not this survey in particular.
I mean,
Just in general.
I would just interject that it probably has something to do with the fact that it's not a school district generated survey, too. So it probably is prudent to make sure Board of Ed knows that an entity outside of the district is asking to survey the students, even though it's voluntary.
And if I could just make one other point too, that a couple of years ago, it was actually in 2018 when the survey was done, and we didn't even approach doing it during pandemic time. It just didn't seem to make sense with everybody doing virtual learning. But a few years ago, when the previous superintendent was here, she had also requested that we invite Windham Technical High School and the ACT Academy to participate as well, and so they did, and they were actually really excited to be able to have this information, and that it was being paid for, they didn't have to pay out of pocket, and so this is partially town funded as well as our DEMIS grant funded, but they have already approved it, so both of those high schools they're ready to take it in the next couple weeks, so that's where things stand with that. And we also, we have, it's CRAC is the organization that will administer it, and then through DEMIS, we also have an evaluator, and so between the epidemiologist through CRAC, through our evaluator, all of this information will be put together, assembled, and then we would like, as the Wyndham Pride Coalition and our evaluator, we would love to be able to come back and do a similar kind of presentation that Dr. Weathers just did to the Board of Ed, and just share this information. But you'll have full access to this. This all goes right back to the school. So yeah,
It's disaggregated data though, so it's not. It's not anything that will divulge anything about who answered and.
Oh,
things
no,
of that sort.
no,
Correct.
it's completely
Yeah.
anonymous. The one thing that we also will be doing, we have an opportunity, and we did this in the past because we had some extra money, is that we can also break it down, and it probably wouldn't be until the end of the summer, but that this can also be just broken down to where the Windham Public Schools will have all of the data from all of the schools, right? And then Windham Public Schools would then get their own data. The ACT Academy would get theirs. So this is in addition, and then Windham Technical School would have all of their own data as well to work with. So, yeah.
I think Neil might have some information for us.
We're learning from some people searching our policies that policy 6162.51 has some things about third party and student protections, and that might also apply here in addition to what the lawyer recommended to us.
So it had to do with what I said earlier, is that a third party outside of the district, and we need to make sure we're protecting the privacy of our students and things of that sort. Okay. Katina.
I'm going to add that also quite a few members of the school system and those other schools, and we have been part of the Pride Coalition for many years. And not only is the information shared with each school, but also as a group, we think about how to help our students and families deal with substance disorders. And they have the Youth Initiative and the Youth Academy, and our students are the ones who participate and peer-to-peer help others not start using different substances. So it's a wonderful prevention program that we should all be proud to have in Windham.
Thank you, Katina. Any other questions? Paula.
I'm sorry, just one more. Relative to taking the survey, as I said, it feels to me a little intense, but I see its worth. I'm definitely not criticizing that. at the time that students are taking it, is there some information given to them as to where they could immediately go for some assistance?
Yes,
You
so.
know, sometimes you
if-
do these things and things come to light that can be a little.
Yes, and that, it's actually on, I'm not sure if it reads on your copy, but on the very last page.
Oh, I'm
there's
sorry,
a
I thought I read the
proctor-
whole
yeah.
thing.
So if this survey brought up any uncomfortable feelings or questions, please talk with your school counselor or social worker, a teacher, or another supportive adult. Outside of school hours, you can reach info line by calling 211 or chat via via chat. So that's there. And, as you would know, this entire survey is also available in Spanish and English, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are we ready to vote? Okay, we'll take a roll call, please. Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Said yes.
Nay.
Okay, thank you very much for being present. That was very helpful. Thanks. So now we have a whole bunch of actions regarding policies, and this is the second reading for them, and so tonight is the night. We've had these before us beforehand. But I'm going to ask Katina, as the chair of the policy committee, to just bring us up to speed on what we're looking at this evening, and then we can decide whether we want to act on it as one or separately.
Yes, as we presented in the last board meeting, and I had the assistance of Dr. Youngberg also, we are the policy committee are looking at what our attorneys have suggested as absolute necessary and up-to-date according to the state and federal laws policies. So what we're presenting to you tonight are some that we have to definitely repeal. For example, the mask mandate, as we no longer are requiring and mandating masks. We're also updating the personnel policies regarding certified and non-certified union personnel, and those are because those policies are already included in the bargaining unit agreements, so they are not necessary to have them separately. The policy regarding family leave, to be very clear about what qualifies you to have family leave, for how long, and what is the reimbursement. And of course, sexual harassment, and that is an update of the policy also, as we have to follow Title IX and Title VII of the federal government, where sexual harassment and intimidation is not allowable. And last but not least, quite a few policies that are no longer, don't need to be in our books at all. They no longer apply, or are the laws are not there. So if Dr. Youngberg has any other comments or any of the other policy, Brandon is not here. Anybody else has comments, I would appreciate that.
Actually, I really need to have a motion first before we get into discussion. So I would, we could, I just want, before you make a motion, we could either move on each one of these separately or as a whole. So, Ilda, you were about to make a motion.
Yes, I make a motion that we vote on them as a whole, especially since she did such a good job explaining each policy.
Is there a second to Ilda's motion? Cody, were you going to say something? Oh, I saw you appear on the screen. Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, Mark is seconding. Any discussion on the motion that's on the floor to act upon them as one motion? We're not voting on them right now, just,
On the motion.
yeah. Okay, we'll take a roll call vote on that, please, Holly. Yes.
Aye.
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 Okay, now we'll open it up to any questions or discussion.
Yeah, Lynn, I have a question.
Yes.
I'm just curious, why are we repealing the policy on masks? What will happen if 6 months from now, we decide we need to have the masks again? Why would we repeal the policy as opposed to just suspend it or postpone it?
That is an excellent question, and I'm going to defer either to Neil or Dr. Youngberg to answer, since I asked exactly the same thing. But I understand that it's because it's optional, the mask right now, and the state government doesn't have a mandate. And in the case that we all have to go back to wearing masks, then we would bring back the policy back to the board for approval.
Dr. Youngberg?
I think that about sums it up. We were going by the recommendation of DPH that we were moving away from an emergency response to the pandemic and moving to a maintenance. So the way that the original policy is written is really about emergency response. And it's a pretty in-depth mask policy, so I think repealing this one is okay. And if we end up in another emergency situation, we would create another one, or they'll create it for us.
And it might be totally different, the requirements for that particular emergency, the rules and regulations and the depth of intervention. So therefore, we need to, we suggest that we repeal this as is.
Are there any other questions on that point or comments? Mark, is that satisfactory response for you? Does that?
Yeah,
Okay,
no, that's fine.
Any other questions or discussion? Paula?
I know that just about all of them here in the back are to be repealed or eliminated. There's several at the very end that appear that they're not legally required, but the recommendation is that they be discussed and decided upon.
Yes.
Are we including those in the ones that?
Only the ones in gray,
Okay,
according to the
so
notes.
these are still up for possible
Yes,
discussion.
just that they are part of that paper.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Did everybody hear that? That's the policies that are in gray that are being repealed. The other ones will be,
Brought up soon.
yeah, brought up later. Any other questions? Comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote, please, on the motion that encompasses all of these. Yes.
So we need another.
Now we need,
motion.
now, oh, yes, now we need another motion. Thank you. Sometimes when you're chairing a meeting, you get tunnel vision, you know? It's not always easy to remember everything. Thank you very much. I'll entertain a motion to adopt these policies.
So I move
As
that the
proposed.
Windham Board of Education accepts the recommendation and moves to action in the second reading of the policies mentioned in our agenda to repeal those policies said.
Well, they're not all repeals, but,
Or revised.
yeah,
Yes, sorry, or revised.
so
Repealed or revised.
item number D on the agenda, numeral 1 through 6.
Number 1 through 6.
Okay.
Thank you.
Motion made by
moved.
Katina. The second, do I get a second?
Second.
Second by Ilda. Any further discussion? Okay, Holly, now we're ready for the roll call vote. Thank you. Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, now we're on to public comment. Is there anybody who would like to speak during the public comment? Don't see anybody coming forward. Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn at 8:15.
We move. How does he say?
Meeting adjourned. I move, we move.